Babysitting your local AD carry isn't something you want to keep doing forever? No problem, we got the right kind of stuff to help you out. And with that, welcome back to another ProGuides Wild Rift video, and this time we're going to talk about 7 truths about how to carry as a support. So let's go. First, you have to understand your role as a support. And let me say this as an introductory statement. Unironically, most lanes are won by the support player, which doesn't mean that you'll win every lane. However, you can always just influence the map if you notice that your AD carry plays very bad. And this is something that you need to understand. Just because you picked a dragon laner as in support, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to stay there all the time. Holding your AD carry's hand is not going to make him a better player if he's unable to hit the enemy. And if you notice that early enough, you can just play without him. Just leave him alone, let him get some gold, and play with your other teammates. Because always think about this, if you want to carry as an AD carry, you first need gold and some hands to back it up. Because if you don't have the mechanical prowess to play the role, you're less likely to carry games in any scenario, even if you get some help by the support. Other than that, you're most of the time either an enchanter player, which means you're poking the lane, or a frontliner that helps your team engage. And with that out of the way, let's just ask about what is your opinion on the worst champion in terms of support you could have on your team. Share your experience with me in the comments below, and while you're at it, hit the like and subscribe button to never miss anything ProGuides in the future. And next up comes picking the right champion. In solo queue, unless you know the AD carry you're playing with, it's most of the time better to play a non-committal champion. Otherwise, you'll die quite a few times due to your teammates being on the wrong page. For example, you'll most likely see more success playing a Janna as you're climbing than playing an Alistar if you're solo queuing. Because even if you're going in and doing the right play, the chance or the likelihood that your teammates are going to follow up on the right play is very low, because they simply don't understand what the right play is. However, such a champion like Janna, who's very mobile on the map and can just go anywhere to bully people, is something that most people in the lower elo brackets, or generally everywhere or anywhere, don't really reckon with and get surprised by. For example, even now in Challenger elo, you see a lot of ranged supports run mid lane level 1 and bully the enemy mid laner, because, well, they just can and they won't lose too much due to it. And the mid laner is going to be very angry afterwards, and the HP differential might matter in the near future. And next up we talk about itemization for a bit. For supports, most of the time you have to make one certain decision throughout the very early stages of the game. Do you want a completed item first, or your boot enchantment? For solo queue or with players I don't really know, I prefer rushing the boot enchant. With this I can influence the map early on and be faster and more agile on it. With a completed item on the other hand, I'd rather go if I know the AD carry, because then I can assume that the AD carry is worth my investment. Because I'm not going to build any selfish item as a support. I want items that grant me and my teammates certain bonuses. And just by building, for example, a Rod of Ages, I just grant myself a bonus, which, what does it accomplish? Not much. I'm the support and I will not carry at least most of the time, unless I'm a Lux and I'm really fed. And if you're personally curious about the best item builds, we got them for every champion, including skill order and the most optimal runes for all our YouTube members. Interested? Then check it out. And now let's talk about the early game as a support. In the early game you have a lot of options available to you. I said at the beginning that you can even go mid lane level 1, you can even go top lane level 1 and you can bully the laner there. There's nothing stopping you, unless your AD carry is very upset with you already. But something that you can always do when you're recalling or have recalled, don't just run straight back to your lane. Run towards the middle lane and then look for opportunities. With this you won't lose out on the chance of making a play. But if you're already on your way back to your dragon lane, you can't make something happen on the baron lane because you didn't pay attention to it and you're too far away from it in the first place. But the most important takeaway here is that you have plenty of options even outside of the lane. And depending on your champion you play in lane, you have to decide what you can do. For example, a Rakan can't really do too much on level 1, because if he goes in level 1 he's fully committed. But compared to this, on level 2 he can go in and out, which means he doesn't full commit anymore. But other champions such as Janna have a few ways to cheat through the laning phase. For example, think of a Janna with an amplifying tomb and their first ability. She can half-life the entire wave, and then an AD carry such as Kai'Sa can one-shot the wave with her Q ability. And then you have a lot of free time and can place deep wards, rotate to another lane, and you get the idea. So for this you have to understand that no game is the same. In every game you'll be presented with multiple options, another few variables and other things you can do. So be on your toes and be ready to take advantage of those situations. And the next thing you have to master is dealing with objectives. As a support, or rather as a team, it's your job to make sure that you have ward coverage for those. And if you cannot contest an objective, make sure to try at least convince your team not to try and die for it. Losing the objective is not the problem. It is dying for it and losing it at the same time. Because, yet again, you'll be losing minions afterwards, towers, the bonus stats from the objective, and you get the idea. Losing the objective is yet again not a problem, ever, unless it's Elder Dragon or Baron, so be very careful about those ones. But if there's an objective that you have to really care about, it would be the scuttle crab in the early game. You all know that the most junglers have a very fragile mental state and losing a crab almost equates for them to a lose. Which means, well, they're gonna run it down. However, you as a support and you being aware of your situation can really much influence the very early stages of the game with not only those roams, but also with those rotations to those crabs. Because if you're on this crab, you will not only tilt the enemy team, because they'll surely flame the support afterwards, because that's always going to happen, because that's the nature of jungle and overall how people perceive it. And not only that, you don't have to stay behind your teammates at all times. You can make very proactive plays on whatever champion you're playing, be it a Lulu, an Alistar, or a Janna, or maybe even a Nami. You don't have to hide behind your team because you are also having an HP pool you can manage. Every resource you have is something you need to use. HP can be utilized to tank damage for your teammates, to bait the enemy, and you get the general idea of what I'm trying to get to. But now let's talk about the mid-game for support. During the mid-game, the rotation kingdom starts. Your AD carry will be busy getting some gold and you're going to terrorize the entire map constantly. Sitting on your AD carry, unless you have to because he's pushing a wave out very far and needs the assistance, is something you generally shouldn't do. Because now we're at the stage in which the AD carry needs to farm to be strong enough for the late game, and you can make so many other plays happen on the map. Just hide there, shadow people, and make sure they don't die. So let's talk about what shadowing is. By shadowing, I mean hiding out of vision from the enemy team. So for example, your top laner is currently overextending very far towards the enemy team's nexus. What you can do is, you can call an ally, for example a jungler, and yourself, and stay in a near brush. And now the enemy team doesn't know if your top laner is making a genuine mistake or if it's a bait. And by doing this, you can bait so many people in because they lack the ability to critically think about the situation. Or maybe even they lack the overall information to process and come to the conclusion that this even might be a trap. And the next thing is something still part of the mid game, but something very important. So for example, you have just pushed in a wave on the dragon lane and have reset. You see that the enemy team is slow pushing into your Baron laner, which means you see 3 waves slowly creeping towards your top laner. It is very likely that he's going to get dove, and if he gets dove, he loses so much gold, because a melee minion is 65 gold, a caster minion is 40 gold, and a cannon is 85 gold. And the XP from a cannon is absurdly high, and you don't want him to lose this. So what you can do is, you just walk up there, because your AD carry has no reason to overextend to go for the wave, because the wave is coming back to him anyway. And if he does this, it's his fault and not your fault. And even if he flames you for it, you shouldn't feel bad about it. Because, well, it's not your fault, it's his fault. That is something you have to understand. Because sometimes you have to make decisions that will make people upset. And even though you're right, they'll still feel upset because that is the way they are. They're emotional and cannot even realize that they're wrong. And this is something that constantly happens in a MOBA environment, because you don't have a higher authority to appeal to. Everybody can just claim he's right, and nobody can really understand if it's right or wrong unless they're very high elo. And even then, being very high elo doesn't necessarily translate into knowing a lot. You can just be very good on a very specific champion and abuse very obvious mistakes over and over again. But what you can do is, you can look at your own replay and look at all the variables presented to you. Look at your own vision and think about what you could have done. And therefore you can come to an understanding of the situation. But be very careful to leave out any personal bias, and I know this is going to be very hard because it's very hard to break out of this bias structure. So to give yourself the best odds of breaking out of those, wait a bit before you take a look at it, so you can make sure that you have calmed down. And now let's talk about the late game. And the late game is very dependent on the champion you're playing, but your two primary roles are either peeling for your carries or going in to set up for your team's success. And to do this properly, you have to identify first who are your vital carries and who do you have to peel for, and who are the dangerous targets on the enemy team that you want to kill. By understanding both of those roles or both of those things, you'll easily get the idea of what you have to do as a support in those situations. Because if you know who your vital carry is, you'll most likely know who the enemy's vital carry is going to be, and therefore your primary target to annoy in a teamfight. And then it's all about sequencing your spells correctly, using them on the right target, as in summoner spells, for example an Exhaust and a late game Diana, and all the other things we've previously discussed. And that's it for today's video. Thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more ProGuides content in the future. See you tomorrow.